Welcome to another episode of NLP for Recovery and Beyond. So, my name is Doug. I'm a master practitioner and trainer of Neurolinguistic Programming, and I penned this book, Under Construction, Navigating the Detours on the Road to Recovery. And we did discuss the bad drive, the intro to the book, and now we are on chapter 1. Emotion is fuel. So, we're going to talk about the 3 pillars of transformation. So let's start. Let's start our road trip at the beginning with the 3 pillars of transformation: state, strategy, and story. And it's important that we begin by filling up with the right fuel to make sure the journey is smooth and enjoyable. Now, before we dive any further here, why on earth does anyone use drugs or alcohol or engage in other things that people could get addicted to? So when we're talking about recovery here, this isn't specifically to substances. This is addictions to, could be porn, could be shopping, food, internet, television, you name it. You know what those strategies are. And you know that it's a challenge if you have loved ones sort of letting you know that they're feeling like they are not being supported, they're not being loved, they're not getting the attention that they deserve and that they need, because you may be distracted by other coping mechanism, other strategies. So the only reason why anybody uses drugs or alcohol or any of these other coping mechanisms is to change our state, to change how we're feeling. So when we get to the fundamentals of everything we do to either avoid pain or get pleasure, experience pleasure, or some combination thereof. I'm avoiding pain and gaining pleasure at the same time. We could see that could be a recipe for challenges should we not be managing them well. So, state. What is state and why is it so important? It is your state of mind, your state of being, your emotional state, or simply how you feel, your emotional fuel. Imagine that you have a new car and you want to go somewhere. If you could go anywhere you want, where would you like to go? Most of us immediately choose a destination that we associate with pleasure: the beach, the mountains, a spa, or grandma's house. For now, let's say you want to go to the bank. Well, why would you want to go there? Because you want to fuel up. You want to get money to buy things or have experiences that will make you feel good. Somewhere in your blueprint, it is written that you need things to feel full, complete, or happy. It's what drives you, what drives us all, to acquire things and experiences that we think will make us feel good. We have been taught that in order to drive with our tank full of positive emotions, we must first need to satisfy that desire. Now, what if I told you you've been fueling up the wrong way your entire life? What if you could find an infinite supply of clean, high-efficiency fuel to run on? Would you make that switch? Of course you would, and I'll show you exactly how to make that happen. So let's look at it this way. Think of your favorite gas-powered car, your dream car. Imagine sitting in the driver's seat of this incredible car, gripping the steering wheel with both hands. You start it up and realize that the gas tank is almost empty. Do you drive the high performance car of your dreams to the nearest gas station, Steve's thrift shop bait and tackle that also sells at 84 octane? It's been sitting for 30, 40 years. It's got that cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching thing. You know, instead of the digital, it's got the analog measurement, right? Would you use that to fill up? Would you risk putting the bottom of the barrel gasoline in the engine of your dream car? Of course not. We know we wouldn't do that. So if you did, what kind of performance would you expect to get? Suboptimal fuel will give you suboptimal performance, i.e., crappy gas will yield crappy results. And on top of that, you risk damaging the engine of your beloved car. So it is when we act out of fear, when we act out of anger, resentment, or any other negative or non-resourceful, lesser grade emotions. It's the equivalent of driving your super cool car on super poor gasoline. You wouldn't think of doing that to one of your most prized possessions, so why would you do that in your life? Why would you fill up on poor quality states or emotions? It simply doesn't make sense. But some of us do that every day. So when we make decisions, when we take actions fueled by anger, frustration, fear, bitterness, resentment, anxiety, depression, etc., what happens inevitably is we get results that are congruent with the emotion we were trying to avoid in the first place, and we get more angry, more depressed, more anxious, more resentful. So as you can imagine, common sense would dictate managing our state is tantamount to our success. So, back to the book. Let's go back to why we want money. When it comes down to it, you and I don't really want money per se. We want what that money can do for us. We want what it will buy and how we think it will make us feel. We don't want to buy things just to have things. We want what those things will do to our mood, or in other words, our state. We really just want to feel good. Inherently, you and I know that we make better decisions with better outcomes when we are in better states. For instance, here's a question I often ask our clients and participants at our events. Have you ever made a bad decision? And without fail, hands go up. But a decision is simply a decision. That's all. The outcome of your decision may not be what you would like or expect. Yet in the end, it's just a decision. What needs to be addressed is not our decision-making ability, it's the emotional state we are in when making decisions. Negative states, i.e. negative fuel, will generate negative outcomes. Making sense so far, right? Think back to a time when you made a decision or took actions in a non-resourceful state. What happened? What kind of results did you get? Now that we've made this distinction, it's time to become familiar with your emotional guidance system, your EGS, which is basically a GPS that shows you the way to go. Excuse me. In the example above, the bank and money were not actually a destination. Changing to a positive state was the true destination. So once you know that, you can set your EGS accordingly and reach your destination with much more ease and confidence. Ultimately, feeling great is your desired state, your desired emotional fuel. What if you entered a destination into your EGS, your emotional guidance system, and it told you there was an alternate, much shorter route to get there? And what if I told you that there was a gas station a few minutes away from you that you could fill up your tank with clean, high-grade, feel-good fuel you need? If your positive emotions tank is full, then you could enjoy your entire ride from the very beginning and even choose different destinations. If your tank is full of happiness and passion, then you don't need to go to the bank to get money and buy the things like a high to feel amazing. Perhaps you'd spend time with friends or loved ones instead, or work on some of those projects you've been putting off, because now that you feel great, they no longer seem like chores. Yet millions of us drive around most of our lives trying to escape the things that are important to us because we can't find a way to derive pleasure from them. As a result, once we realize that we haven't done the things we meant to do, we end up feeling guilty, unfulfilled, and empty. Has this ever happened to you? Earlier on, I said that you've been filling up the wrong way. Well, fueling up the right way is exactly what successful people are experts at doing. By successful, by the way, I mean people who are hitting the mark in all areas of life. They are happy and wealthy in their energy, relationships, work, and best of all, their spirit. They're familiar with the infinite, clean, high-grade fuel we've been talking about, and the first thing they do every day of their lives is fill up with it. They start out feeling great instead of taking long drives only to feel great at the end. Remember this chain of thought because we're going to discuss it more down the road when we get to the tiers of experience that create sustainability. So this is such an interesting philosophy to wrap our heads around, that we are actually in charge of how we feel. We decide how to feel. We are creating these states, which I'm going to share and get into, but interesting that we could take control of this, isn't it? Where do successful people get their fuel? How do they generate their desired states? Every day they prime their pump and fill their tank by creating their own emotional fuel. They become so good at it that they enjoy the entire ride while focusing on new challenges and reaching new destinations at the same time. Successful people value a life well lived, and they value happiness to such a degree that they create their own joy. They know that money and things won't make them feel great. Yet, by feeling great, it becomes easier for them to do the necessary things to create money, to buy things and experiences. They're using the right fuel and heading for the right destination. What I need you and I to learn is how to prime our pumps with the proper fuel in order to get to our true destination. Have you ever siphoned gas out of one container into another? Do you remember how it works? Remember doing that? I know we always think of siphoning gas, right? So think about this. All right. The way we siphon gas is we take information, energy from one place, so whatever that is, the gas tank or fish tank, doesn't really matter. And then we prime the pump. So we're actually taking the energy out of one vessel and we start getting it into the other vessel. And then once the connection is made, it then flows through. And the truth is, it doesn't matter what the energy is. I mean, it could be water, it could be gas, it could be poison, it could be juice. It doesn't really matter. The function is the same, and that's what we're going to dive into. So, in the meantime, let's shift our focus a little. What are drugs and alcohol? Why do people use them? They take drugs and drink alcohol because they are quick ways to change their state and to feel good or avoid pain. These substances become part of their strategy to change how they feel in relation to their EGS, their emotional guidance system. Millions of people sit around every day waiting to win the emotional lottery. They don't get it. There's no such thing. Using drugs and alcohol is like swiping an emotional and spiritual credit card. The happiness is not real, and eventually it has to be paid back. Have you ever put yourself into emotional debt that way? You use, go into debt, and then you feel worse. You swipe again, and then that card's maxed out. You take out another one and keep swiping, and you continue swiping until finally you can't get another credit card, and now you've ended up with a different kind of state, a state of depression, a state of emotional bankruptcy. So why do people do that? Well, to get to the truth, we need to understand some of the science behind the behavior. First and foremost, we are wired to feel pain, or actually, we are wired to avoid pain. Neurobiologically speaking, the pain sensors outnumber our pleasure sensors by a ratio of 10 to 1. That means our natural inclination is not only to notice pain and discomfort, but to do something about it, to avoid it. Action is the antidote, but it can create a vicious cycle. We take action to avoid pain, which ultimately creates more pain. Then to avoid the newly created pain, we engage in the very activity that created the pain in the first place, and so on and so forth. That crazy eight that I'm sure you've seen Heidi share with you as well. And if you don't know Heidi, that would be odd because this is also on her channel. But Heidi Rain, go to HeidiRain.com and learn more about her, where you can learn how we help families, we help people navigate their road of life in relation to addictions of all sorts, not just, as I said, substances. When families are suffering, oftentimes is because they think there's something that is out of their control. And there are lots of things out of our control. And the most important things that are in our control are ourselves. And that's what this book is also about. So you get the idea, but take note, this circuitous pattern is not limited to drugs and alcohol. We engage in all sorts of behavior and create a myriad of states that provide a temporary illusion of feeling good, or at the very least, non-pain. In truth, it's really not as painful as the perceived alternative and lasts a lot longer. If you don't have conscious knowledge of where you want to go or what your destination is, then you're going to move along blindly, forgetting that all you really wanted was to feel good. What happens if you can't buy things? You don't feel good. You don't enjoy life. In light of what you know about the effects of state, do you think that a positive state will make it easier for you or make you more effective at creating wealth or getting the things you want? Well, absolutely. Successful people know it, and now you know it too. Which brings us to strategy, the second pillar of the three pillars of transformation. To function properly, brains need neurotransmitters, fuels of well being like dopamine, GABA, serotonin. So, for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to refer to all neurotransmitters as fuel. When your brain creates fuel, you feel good. Drugs and alcohol stimulate the production of fuel by measurable percentages. But this phenomenon is not limited to drugs and alcohol. Food also stimulates the increase of neurotransmitters by up to 50%. The term comfort food may be spot on. Sex will increase dopamine by up to 150%. Alcohol and THC, or in other words, marijuana, will increase by up to 300%. Opiates will increase by up to 750%. And crack, cocaine, and methamphetamines up to 1,200% of an increase of that dopamine, of those neurotransmitters. So you feel 1,200 times better and quickly. The delivery of these stimulants to the brain is akin to a supercharger or turbocharger on your car. The problem, of course, is the impossible sustainability of these strategies. So if you try to run this pattern or strategy over time, you'll undoubtedly arrive fueled on desperation. You will arrive broken down and in much need of repair. You'll need a tune-up. This book is going to be your tool shed, the place that houses strategies you can implement to create a happy, fulfilled life. The car is yours, your metaphoric vehicle for your life. This is your shop, and you are the mechanic. I will provide the tools and show you how to use them, but you have to do the work yourself. If you don't, you will chug and sputter along the road until the next time you break down, and the next, so on and so forth. However, if you play full out, I will show you not only how to do the maintenance and keep you running, I will also show you how to build and modify your supercar to run better than ever. You don't even have to want to do the work. It helps, of course, if you do, but if you have at least want something different in your life. Do you want to have something different in your life? And my hallucination is we're kindred spirits. If you're still listening, you absolutely do. So here's an example. Let's say for a moment that you want to improve your health, but you don't want to work out. If you work out even when you don't want to, you're going to get results. Your body doesn't care whether you want to work out or not. But if you push yourself and do the exercises and challenge yourself, your body is going to respond and inspire you by the results. You can't wait to be healthy, to start doing healthy things. Good health is a byproduct of healthy behavior, not the other way around. 5 years from now, will you be pushing your rusty old car down the road or taking laps in the winner's circle? It's important to know that the emotional fuel you are using right now, you are generating right now. You and I do our emotions. We're like power plants. And what does a power plant do? Right? It generates energy, and that's what emotional fuel is. You got it, energy. You and I are the power plants that generate energy at will, even subconsciously. As a matter of fact, we are literally generating energy all the time. A conscious awareness to the way we generate fuel and do our emotions will give us an easier access to better states, which should allow us to create better strategies for making decisions and taking better actions, thereby enjoying better results. We need to learn new and better strategies for mastering our state. Which gets us to another philosophy here, which is the map is not the territory. Now, this is a presupposition of NLP. So let's unpack this a little bit. Reality and our perception of what's real are never exactly the same. That doesn't make us right or wrong. It's just a perception. See, the truth is our reality is our perception and vice versa. How we perceive is what we are going to say, and that doesn't mean it's always accurate or right. And I'm sure you could think of some times where you thought something happened a certain way. You thought someone said a certain thing or the way they said it, and it turns out that it wasn't what you perceived. You've probably played the game where someone passes through a room or something happens when a group of people are watching. They all saw the same thing, but when you interview them, you get different responses. No two are quite the same. Now, they all experienced the same thing, but they each had a different perception. Is any one of them right or wrong? No, it's just their different perceptions, and each one is responding to in their own experience, not to the reality itself. They're responding to the meaning they've given it. Now, a map is just a map, right? Well, not exactly. Everyone has a unique reality map or model of the world, and no one's map is more real or more accurate than anyone else's. It's just different. It's just their map. I don't need to tell people when they're doing something that is going to screw them up. They tell me. I just ask questions and make simple statements. We'll talk about their situations with an example of driving off a cliff, and I'll tell them that if they keep going like this, they'll probably drive over the edge. Even if I say something like, you're going off that cliff, they'll probably say, ha, screw you, and keep on going. But if it comes from a different angle, sit down next to them and ask, where are you going? They're more likely to talk to me. So let's see. Did I just lose that? Just lost my place here. Here we go. It's the same principle for effective communication with a child. The best way to talk to them is to meet them where they are, not where you are. That means stooping down so that you could be eye to eye. Now, if I respond without judgment, just with understanding, I can help them determine their own outcome and work through the process. The problem that many people have, including therapists, is that they always know best and tell the loved one or patient what they think and put their own map on someone else's territory. And that someone keeps telling them that it doesn't work. The map just doesn't make sense to them. It's still the same principle. When someone else tells you something, it means nothing. But when you tell yourself something, it means everything. And even though you come back and tell that person they were right, you'll still make the same mistake until you believe it yourself. Sometimes it just comes down to a matter of choices. You need variety to expand your options and to find your own map for the territory. And that brings us to the final pillar, the third pillar, story. So the first pillar is state, our emotional fuel. The second pillar is our strategy, our plan. And then last is our story, the narrative. And this is probably the most fun part of your journey. You're in your dream car, you've just filled up with the premium fuel, and you're in a great state. You're full of hope and operating from good, resourceful emotions. This is the part where you get to choose where you want to go, the route you will take to get there, and how fast you want to drive. There's an open road in front of you called your life. This is the perfect place to start transforming your life story. So let's begin with a short, story. One day, this guy named John died, and when he got to the pearly gates, he met St. Peter, who welcomed him to heaven. And John immediately noticed that heaven was more incredible than you could ever imagine. Everything tastes better. Everything looks better. As a matter of fact, you don't even have eyes, so you see things even better. I mean, this is the most incredible thing he ever could imagine. And St. Peter starts to tell him, and now, by the way, everything smells better because you don't have a nose, really. You have the spiritual nose, so you actually have more olfactory sensors going on because you're not being slowed down by the meat sack that you are having down on earth. So it's so incredible that you have your own theme music when you walk around, should you choose to enjoy it. So if you remember from Family Guy, when Peter got to have a theme song every time he walked around, he's walking on the bus, riding on the bus. He had all these great themes. It always reminds me of that funny scene. So St. Peter begins to share all of the incredible opportunities for experiencing heaven. And then he says, though, there is one rule here in heaven. And that rule is, do not go through that set of doors over there. There's a door. He said, do not go through that door. And of course, John says, yeah, I can do that. No problem. I mean, I'm taken in heaven. Why do I got to go through that door? This is more than enough for me. So as time goes on and he sees all his friends and family and he's having the grand old time, everything is exactly how Peter described it and even better because you couldn't put into words the joy and the experiences that he was having in heaven. But as he was doing it, he was starting to get closer and closer to the door, and as you could imagine, curiosity starts to creep in, and so he spends a little more time towards the door, but moves away. But then finally, he notices the door's open a crack. So what does he do? He walks up to it and kind of starts peeking through, kind of going, "Oh, what's going on over there? Let me see," and kind of knocks it open a little bit. And then the door's open and nothing happened. No one said anything. So he walks in, and as he walks in, he notices that his room is giant. It appears to be bigger than even heaven. It's just incredible. Boxes everywhere, little boxes, round boxes, square boxes, all different sized boxes, little tiny ones, big giant ones, but they're all stacked up in a weird way. And it looked like the inside of that giant warehouse. If you remember Raiders of the Lost Ark, when they hid the Ark in that giant warehouse, it was like that. It was expansive. So he starts looking around and he's noticing that there is information on these boxes. There's names and beginning and ending dates. And what he notices is that these are the boxes or the names are so he assumed they're the boxes of the people he saw in heaven. It had their birth date and then their expiry date. So next thing he starts to wonder is, where's my box? So he starts to unpack it, and it works kind of like the Dewey Decimal System. He's able to figure out he's at least generally speaking, how to find his box. And so he starts looking around and figures out the system and finds himself in front of his box. And he's thinking to himself, well, what do you think he's thinking? That's right. What's in the box? What's in the box? So he's wanting to open the box, and he's having some thoughts around it. And as he's sitting there, paused, he's about to open it. It was just, he's thinking about it, and then he's about to open it, and then boom, 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 boom. All of a sudden, it's St. Peter. St. Peter's there. I was like, John, what gives? And he's like, oh my God, St. Peter's like, John, I give you one rule. Really? One rule? You can't follow one rule. And he's like, oh, St. Peter, I'm so embarrassed. Oh my gosh, I walked by and then the door's open and I walked in and I couldn't help myself. And I mean, you're not going to kick me out, are you? And he's like, shh, 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 shh. It's okay. It's okay, John. You can open the box. But before you open the box, I must tell you what is inside the box. Inside this box is every laugh you lost, every smile that slipped through your fingers, every opportunity for joy, for excitement, for fulfillment, everything that you could have experienced but didn't because you were playing small. You were living out of fear, out of frustration, out of resentment, out of anger, out of desperation. Every opportunity you lost to experience the life you could have had that would have blown you away, that would have made heaven seem trite. Every opportunity that you didn't take advantage of is in that box. But really what's in that box is the regret, the pain of not having that life, the pain of the regret of meeting the person you could have been. And that will be your eternity, living in the pain of the regret of what you could have been because you played small, because you lived a life fueled with anger, frustration, bitterness, fear, anxiety, depression. Do you want to open that box? So the purpose of this book here, one of my goals in this book is to help you experience a life to the extent that when you get to the end of your days, you will live a life of so much joy, passion, adventure, such creativity, such incredible excitement that your box will be so small, so infinitesimal that you wouldn't even be interested in looking for it because you will have known that you lived the most incredible life, that you lived your highest ability, that you lived your best life as your best. You gave big, you loved big, you supported big, that you had every joy, every laugh, you touched, moved, and inspired beyond what you ever thought was possible. Isn't that the life you really want? So if it is, you've got to start telling a different story. You've got to stop and change the question. You can't not think. You can't stop asking questions, which your brain is constantly doing. And here's what's going on. Here's what your brain is always doing. It's going like this. It's asking this. Well, actually, right now, don't ask a question. Go ahead. No, stop it. No, just don't ask a question right here. Sit quietly and do not ask a question. And inevitably, when we have this conversation, someone says, well, I didn't ask a question. And then my question is, well, how do you know? Because the only way to know whether or not you ask the question is to be asking a question. Am I asking a question? Or to do your best to focus on one thing. And then while you're focusing on that one thing, you're actually asking, am I focused on that one thing? Is there something else coming in? So we cannot not ask questions. So really the questions we're generally asking are these. What's going on? You're asking what's going on right now. Then you're asking, what does it mean? You're looking for the meaning of it. We're meaning-making machines. We do not do anything because then after you find out what it means, then and only then do you make a decision as to what you're going to do about it. Now, back to the first pillar, state. Do you think the state we are in is going to have influence on the meaning we give anything? And you know as well as I do that absolutely it does. So nothing has any meaning except the meaning we give it. So doesn't that stand to reason why emotional intelligence, why emotional mastery is the most important set of strategies we could learn is how to manage our state, how to fuel ourselves with the right fuel, how to get rid of the bad fuel. So here's what's interesting. Since nothing has any meaning except the meaning we give it, then this could be the beginning or the end of a beautiful relationship, couldn't it? You see, stories are how we learn. They're the allegories that represent our lives, and we are the protagonist, the antagonist, the producer, the writer, the star, the marketer, the narrator. We're everything. We are all the parts, all the experiences, all the emotions in the story we create. So what is the story you are telling? You always have the power to write a better story and to stop listening to other people's bad stories that influence and affect your state. Have you ever had that happen? You've been around an energy vampire who they're telling their stories and they're just sucking the life out of you? Well, we're either being affected or infected, and we are also always affecting or infecting. So the question we must ask ourselves is, the quality of your question determines the quality of your answers. Think about that, right? If you want better answers, ask better questions, right? So the question you must ask yourself is, are you writing yourself as a victor or a victim? So your story probably likely involves trauma. It has to. Life has trauma. Everything has some element of trauma. So think about this for a minute. Imagine a book where chapter 1 reads, everything's good. Chapter 2, everything's still good. Chapter 3, all fine, just fine. Chapter 4, see chapter 1, right? Just keeps going. It's so good, right? So without the drama, we have no story worth reading. What would you do with that book? We'd put it down, wouldn't we? If it just said everything was great, everything was great, everything was great. The most boring book ever. See, we connect. It's interesting. In many ways, we connect with other people's pain, like little woundology. Like we connect with these stories. So it's vital that you and I are aware of the pains of the past so that we could use them for purpose, so that we can connect with someone. Remember, we shared a little bit earlier about getting down to when you're talking to a child, get to their level, align, meet someone with that, but then lead them to possibility. So it is amazing that you may have these challenges in the past, you may have had these traumas and so forth. This is a gift. Should you make it mean it's a gift so that you can help others, you can make a difference? Without drama, you have no story worth telling. You're simply living a life of convenience, running the same patterns day after day. It's like poor quality gas. You chug along in an average state with no passion, no adventure, just a middle of the road life. Until you change your patterns, adopt a more resourceful, happier state, more resourceful state, and get out of second gear, you'll go on living a life of convenience, which is never a fulfilling life. You and I need drama for an exciting story, don't we? You need to be dynamic and play full out. Change your strategy and upgrade your state to tell a better story. It's your life, isn't it? So let's imagine this. Let's say I visit your house, I walk over to the TV where you are streaming music into the room and change the station. You've just gone from loud, upbeat, energizing music to loud, sedating pan pipes. What would you do? Would you settle for the panpipes or rebuke me nicely and go back to happy music? Millions of people would let the panpipes play and avoid confrontation and tell themselves that they're being considerate and flexible. The problem with that is it's your story. When you let people come in and mess with the story you want to tell and you want to write, you're giving up control and leaving the outcome to someone else. That's what we do with negative self-talk also. That voice in our head that needs to be reprogrammed. And that's where shares a little bit of the NLP about NLP of recovery. That inner dialogue, what neurolinguistic programming is about is understanding the neurology, right? Our wiring, our brain, linguistic, our language, and then the programming. The creators of the technology, Richard Bandler and John Grinder, they looked at the brain, and that old analogy, we say the brain is like a computer. And what do we do with computers? We program them. So that's what this is really about, is teaching you how to take control of your life and reprogram yourself for success, for fulfillment, for a level of life that's worth being sober for, right? That's the challenge, is that if you don't have a life worth being sober for, it's going to be a little challenging. So all of these conversations are designed to help you write that story of a life worth being sober for. We keep telling ourselves the negative things and playing the same music that we don't even like over and over again, yet we have all the power we need to create a new story, to change the music, to tune in to another station, as it were. It's pretty much impossible to tell a new story when you're busy telling an old negative story and rehashing bad experiences. That's like living your life from the rearview mirror. How can you write a new story when you're looking back all the time? Instead of looking where you're going, you'll go where you're looking, right back to where you were when everything started going off the rails. Stories carry lots of emotions. They make you feel certain ways. They can either change your state into a positive one or bring you down and keep you running old limiting patterns. You can't be a worrier if you want to be a warrior. Back to the idea of our emotional intelligence, that emotional fuel. If we're telling a story that then makes us focus on the problems, makes us create those images of the pain, of replay that trauma, we're actually creating post-traumatic stress disorder for ourselves by repeatedly playing that movie, that story, that song over and over again. So if you remember Dorothy and her pals in The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy always had the shoes. She could have gone home anytime she wanted. The lion already had courage. The scarecrow already had a brain, and the tin man already had a heart. They just kept telling themselves a bad story based on a terrible strategy and a negative state. And we know that any decision we make from a bad state will not be very resourceful. Dorothy had the power to write a better story from the very first day, but she believed the lies she kept telling herself and others. It's only in the context of the meaning that we give something that actually matters. Isn't that a powerful way to experience these stories, these movies? Go, my gosh, yeah, that's why we connect to these. Dorothy had the shoes on all the time. The lion always had the courage. The scarecrow always had the brain. The Tin Man always had a heart. And it's our job to remember that. And the only way we do that is by representing ourselves to our ability to write it. Because if you could think of it, it's in you. Then you could generate it. Then you could create it. So, birds of a feather. Just like the person who challenges himself to greatness in a sports or business, when push comes to shove, that person will have more resources available to them when the time comes to take it to the next level. The person who plays a 6-year-old is not building his game. Meaning, if you're playing tennis, great, or racquetball, I play racquetball, and, you have two courts. You've got a court with the person who's just starting out. Maybe it's a younger kid who's just learning the game and they're able to hit the ball. They could hit the ball, but they have not been playing it. Or you could play with the A-listers, the people who are crushing it on the court, who really know how to play very well. Now, we could go on to the court with the inexperienced person and kick their butts at the game if you play it all. And you go, oh, I feel great. I won every game. I am the champion of the world. I won. But we wouldn't improve. Our game would actually get worse. However, if we go into the game, I love playing people who are better than me, because what does that do? It challenges me to greatness. It challenges me to learn new ways, new strategies, new mindsets, new attitudes about the game. So it's vital for you and I to surround ourselves with people who challenge us to greatness. That's the way it is with most everything in life. So when I have choices to make, I consciously get as present in that environment as I can so that I can get the most out of it. That's what most successful people do. They don't play inferior opponents. They get up and play with the best. Right? Have you ever noticed that people who make a lot of money surround themselves with other people who make a lot of money? Energy attracts energy. Even a nonconformist will find groups of other nonconformists to bond or conform with. They do. That's because it's a human need. And you'll learn shortly the top 4 reasons for that behavior. But here's the thing. When you're feeling stressed out, bothered, challenged, or in any other unproductive emotion, and you're in that negative state, what kind of strategy do you think you're going to use? And the truth is, you're probably not going to be using a powerful strategy. So let's see here. Where are we at here? Birds of feather. We're going to finish this, and then we will go to another chapter in the next video. The one that challenges you, or the one that's easy? Of course, the easy one. It's more normal. The one we are the most comfortable with, and then we make an excuse for avoiding a challenging one, and we'll say it's too hard. And we go back to the easy behavior patterns because they are the nearest and dearest, even though they are probably what got us into the negative situation in the first place. They are our go-to coping mechanisms, the ones we need to change in order to get better results. Unfortunately, when you're trying to cope or deal with a challenge, when you have a need, you will sacrifice your values to meet your need. We all do it. When you're in a crappy state and you do need to feel comfortable again, even though drugs and alcohol are hurting you, you use the same thing that got you there because it's familiar to you and it changes your state. And insert whatever behavior. Insert the binge watching of television, of whatever shows you watch. Insert comfort food. Insert sex, porn, gambling. You name it, it's all the same thing. It's going to have the same effect. It gets you into the comfort zone for the moment, but you know that's not sustainable. You need to get more behavioral flexibility in state management, and for that, you need emotional mastery. Only by implementing a different strategy can you change to a more resourceful state. Keeping the birds of a feather concept in mind, you will find that working new and better strategies will be much easier for you when you surround yourself with people who have learned great techniques for managing their own state. When all is said and done, you won't be able to find boxes for your friends or for yourself, who you surround yourself with, who play full out and who have stayed in the game. Now, what's your story? What kind of story are you writing? Yep, an epic. One with heroes and villains, adventures and misadventures, loves and losses, and most of all, a happy ending. A little box with nothing in it. Well, maybe a few Academy Awards for Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Director, Best Producer, and most of all, Best Screenwriter. So here are a couple of ideas to help you write your story. Surround yourself with people who believe in you to create higher accountability. Right? We live up to the highest standards of our peers. Right? We're going to live up to, or as a matter of fact, we might even live up to our lowest standards of our peers, which is important to recognize because the higher our standards, the more we're going to create the life of that higher frequency. So hang out with people who are living the life you aspire to have. Man, when you're hanging out with someone who their normal is what you and I aspire to, game changer. Oh my goodness. If you're unhappy, you will tell an unhappy story. Change your focus and tell a better story. And this is a decision. Right, there's an old saying that change is automatic. Life is going to change regardless of what's going on in the world. Transformation is a choice. So if you and I don't do anything, will our lives change? Absolutely. They'll continue to get worse. So when we make a decision to transform, we are now living at the cause, not the effect. Let's actually continue, shall we? Let's talk about leverage. Leverage in regards to our story. So one of the ways to get lasting change and the transformation that you need in order to write a new story is through leverage. So what is leverage? Leverage is having an unfair advantage. So the example in the book is, let's imagine you had a big boulder, right? Big giant boulder. And if you or I were to walk right up to it and try and push it to knock it over or move it, we of course would be unable to. However, with leverage, we would be able to move it. So what does that mean? Well, the way we would create a lever, or a lever as it were, we would take a long stick and we would have the one end of the stick wedge it in between the ground and the boulder. Then we would take another small rock and we would stick it underneath the point right in front of the boulder, and that would act as what is called a fulcrum. Now, the longer the stick is, the more leverage we would have and be able to move that boulder. So the more pain in this context, right? So in this model, the leverage we're looking for is pain, right? Because you and I do more to avoid pain than to gain pleasure. If we get both, that's a win. But the truth is that it's the pain that motivates us to take action. So when we understand that, when we come down to it, the emotional leverage we're talking about is that pain. And we're wired for it, if you remember. 10 to 1, we're wired for pain sensors versus pleasure sensors. So we do more to avoid pain than to gain pleasure. So leverage is the non-pain, which means our goal is to get leverage on our pain so we can move into a non-pain state. So consider this. While you're listening to this, maybe you were reading the book, could it be that there's a part of your life that was too painful going on for you not to focus on this book, this chapter? So in other words, were you able to, you knew there would be a potential solution in this book to help you overcome painful or negative situations. So the option to not read or not listen would in fact ultimately be too painful, be more painful than to actually read or listen to this book. And how often have you heard someone or yourself say, "I'm glad I don't have to live like that anymore"? So what they or you are actually saying is that at the time you took your drug of choice, or whatever that strategy was, you were doing it to get out of some kind of pain. Well, we all have different language for it. Some people call it boredom, some people call it feelings, some people call it escape. So the presupposition here is that you did what you did, all you did so that you could feel good, to avoid pain. You were not feeling the way you wanted to beforehand. So you were either looking to avoid pain, or it was bored and you're bored, it was boring, so you did something to spice it up, to make it less painful. So, with that being said, since we all have these different languages for it, we just need to understand what the strategy is that we're running. So now that we know the philosophy behind the leverage, we know that reading this book or listening to it is one of the ways to get leverage. You either bought this book, downloaded the MP3 or the podcast, and you may have gotten this as a gift. And ultimately, the big stick that's going to help us move from these boulders and transform that pain into some form of purpose, some sort of pleasure, some sort of way to give meaning to this experience. So, right now, to get leverage, it is time for you to unleash the demons that have been holding you hostage. You're going to reveal to yourself what that fear of not being enough has cost you. So, using a pen and paper, you'll write down some key questions that can help you accomplish that. You are going to prime your pump. So, we want to go as deeply as you possibly can so that you can recall as much as you can of that extraordinarily heavy stuff that gets in your way, the stuff that you seem to not be able to get past. Now, you may be tempted to minimize, rationalize, and even justify some situations, like it isn't that bad. I did that because of this or that, rationalizing, giving these reasons. But don't do that. In order to be effective, you need to be as honest with yourself as you possibly can. Like a compound bow. If you're familiar with a compound bow, right? If you just pull it back a little bit and you let go, if you pull back as far as you can comfortably go, and then you release the quiver, what happens if it's a compound bow, you went as far as you can, it'll just die. But you get to a point where it gets harder and harder and harder to pull back. And then finally you get to a certain point where pop, you go to the next level. And that leverage that you have at that point is exponentially greater than what you had before, which means that arrow will fly so much further. So this piece of paper is going to be your healing, your forgiveness. You know that thing that you don't want to talk about with your therapist, this is a good time to write it down. You're not going to talk about it with anyone. You're going to just peel back the layers and expose the roadblocks that have kept you from your true destiny. So here's some questions to ask yourself while you're going through this. If I were to expire right now, what would be in that box? In that box from the story earlier. What have you missed out on? What has this addiction, especially the behaviors behind it, cost you? Whether it's, again, this doesn't have to be substances only. What fueled the addiction? Who's no longer in your life because of the negative past experiences? Who have you pushed away? What experience did you have as a result of living in that fear? Were you afraid to change, afraid you couldn't change, or that you would never change? If you spent years in addiction, there are a lot of opportunities, a lot of lost chances that you missed out on. What are some of your regrets? What relationships have changed as a result of this bad experience? What are some of your hurts? What has all of this cost you? What has it been costing you? What's the worst thing, the most terrifying thing that has happened to you? What is the one thing you won't say out loud? What are some of the stories that you tell to shift the blame from yourself? Who or what else did you brain? Now, what you've written down is just what it costs you to live in fear, to create that boulder, that's roadblock. And it's a tough exercise, but if you do it wholeheartedly, it will leave you in an uncomfortable state at first. But you don't have to stay there. You control your own state. When you've finished answering those questions, stand up, loosen your shoulders, shake your arms, roll your head around a few times, and stretch your arms overhead, looking up as you do it. Hold that pose for a few seconds. All right, how quickly are you able to change your state? Pretty quickly. If you just stand up straight right now, change your physiology radically, and you can change everything, won't you? Now, we'll talk about that more later, but that was just to give you a quick sort of experience around that. State is the key to shifting almost negative emotion in your life to a better one. Changing your state is one of the most important things. The ability to change our emotions, to refuel ourselves at any moment is the most valuable resource you could have. So if you're willing, you're going to master priming your pump and filling up on premium fuel, increasing your leverage every day, building that muscle, building that strength, that ability to automatically get into a more resourceful state is power. So how many times has a family member told you, or maybe told someone else, how your behavior was affecting them? How did that feel? Bad, right? The pain finally got bad enough that you decided things must change. You believe that you must change them, and then you picked up this book or this podcast because you believe it can give you that leverage, that ability to take action. That's just step one. Step two is that you have to interrupt that old limiting pattern that you got into that situation in the first place. Now, these patterns are more than just habits. As a matter of fact, it would probably be fair to say the word habit comes up sometimes before it became an addiction. But we are clearly running other patterns as well, because drugs and alcohol were not the problem initially. They were the solution. They were a strategy. So if the solution is the pattern, whatever that non-resourceful behavior, drugs, alcohol, porn, eating, gambling, gaming, whatever it is, the pattern is a thought process that we're running. It must be interrupted in order to create new ones. So, interrupting these old patterns. So think about the worst movie you've ever seen, the one that you would never want to see again. Now, would you buy that on DVD? No, of course not. Would you put it on your giant, if you have a 85-inch TV or bigger, would you play this crappy movie in your house? No. And if you came home one day and that was playing, what would you do? Would you turn it up or would you turn it off? Well, the truth is, you and I both know that you turn it off. You change the channel. You do anything to actually no longer watch that. So the DVD is like a pattern, right? Everything's got the laser. It goes through there. So the first step is to get leverage. The second step is to interrupt that old limiting pattern, that old DVD, right? So what would you do? You could scrape it, right? When you go to a treatment center, when you go to a therapist, when you take any of these actions, what you're doing is that you're interrupting that pattern. You're getting leverage, interrupting that pattern by talking about it, because most people don't, or sometimes maybe talking about it is the pattern. Maybe you've gotten addicted to sharing or oversharing the stories, the drama, the pains, because you're getting buy-in. And we'll talk about that as to why we even do that. So the third step is to replace that pattern with something else, something that is sustainable, something of your choosing. And you have to create a new compelling pattern and condition it until it becomes your new normal or your new habit, so we can create that new environment. And since we're always running some kind of program, we must decide to be the leader and write our own pattern. And if you're going to allow yourself to be programmed by someone or something else, this will be the issue. So be the leader. Live at the cause, not at the effect. Are you going to be codependent on your environment or interdependent and choose for yourself? Remember when God had all the earth by himself? Kind of boring, right? Not so hot. But when you co-create, you use the resources that are available to you and create a new, compelling story. So the three mantras that need to be part of your new belief system and applied to your life when things aren't going the way you want is the first is that things must change. Not that they should. We don't get our shoulds. We get our musts. So things must change. Then the next belief you and I must have is that I must change them, right? Leadership 101. Take personal responsibility. Say, no more. That's it. I'm taking control and I am changing it. I must change. And then the third belief that you and I need to have in order, must have in order to create this lasting transformation, right? Is first, things must change. Then I must change them. And on top of that, we do need to have a belief of possibility. So not only must things change, not only must I change them, the other belief is that I can change them. So once we adopt that belief, then we're able to interrupt those old patterns. Well, first get that leverage, then interrupt those old patterns, then create new empowering patterns and condition them till they become our new normal. Now, when we're at events, you're at events with us, with Heidi and I, we address all of this on a much deeper level. We make it a huge, powerful experience that goes on for a few hours. So this is step one, listening to the podcast and engaging with us. Step two will be actually applying on a deep, deep level that. So the last thing in the book here, in this chapter, is this playbook exercise. And this is about understanding your conditions for your state, meaning what needs to be present in order for you to feel a certain way. So here's the exercise, and feel free to play along. For every emotion or state that you want to experience, right? So these are the ones you're towards, the things you're going after, your pleasurable ones. For every condition or state that you want to experience, write down the conditions that need to be present in order for you to feel that way. For example, to feel safe, I need blank to be present. To feel content, I need blank to be present. So insert whatever state you also want. To feel loved, to feel confident, to feel joy, to feel happy, whatever that positive, resourceful emotion that you are looking for. This is about your environment. What needs to be present? Now, for every emotion or state that you want to avoid, write down those conditions that are present in order to accomplish that. So, for example, to feel angry, I need blank to be present. In order for me to be angry, here's what has been present in the past. Like, let's not be so future focused and program this in, just an awareness. So in the past, in order to feel angry, I needed X to be present. Or in order to feel scared, I needed X to be present. And keep these handy because we're going to be digging in and working more on some of these. So these are really some high level where we're unpacking bits and pieces of how we're wired. We're understanding our state, our strategy, our story, how they impact us, how to get leverage on the things we are committed to changing and transforming. And remember, change is automatic. Progress is a choice. So this is about leadership. This is about generating transformation in our lives. So thank you so much for being here. I know I had already mentioned about sharing and commenting. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, please reach out. And we will be doing chapter 2 next, and that's the behavioral trinity. So awesome. I love you for who you are and who you aren't, and I will see you or be with you next time. All right. God bless.